The Oklahoma Sooners are in the midst of their offensive coordinator search. Who's it going to be? We'll talk about that and so much more on tonight's episode of Locked On Sooners Live.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. And before we get too deep into the show, Josh, I think we need to wish a very special congratulations to one of our favorite, followers, listeners, subscribers, and many of yours as well. Good old Gunny of Stutzman Army, who had a baby this last week. So congratulations to you, man. Hope you and the wife are getting some good rest in these early days. Enjoy all the early days because they go by real quickly, but congrats, man. The Oklahoma Sooners in the midst of a big offensive coordinator search. It's easy to kind of get overly stressed about this, but at the same time, you look at Joe Castiglione's history and the success that Oklahoma's had in their assistant coach hires, and you feel pretty comfortable. I feel pretty comfortable. I'm like, searching constantly for, okay, what's going to happen, but I'm pretty relaxed about where Oklahoma's headed in this search. I feel like there's a lot of really good options. Josh, where do you stand with the offensive coordinator search? How are you feeling about it? And where do you think Oklahoma ends up landing in that direction?
Well, I'm excited about it. I think it's fun when you have this. And at least so far, Dozie Ezukanma aside, we'll talk about that. I don't know that this is going to have these bad ripple effects for Oklahoma on the recruiting side. Obviously, that remains to be seen. But I tend to think it's going to be okay for Oklahoma. So if that's the case, then the rest of it, I think, is exciting. Well, what does the future look like for Oklahoma offensively? Is it an in-house hire with Luttrell, with Wells, with Joe John Finley? Emmett Jones has been a name that some have tossed around. Or is it out of Oklahoma hire? I tend to think that this is going to wind up as an in-house hire and that it's either Luttrell or Wells. But I told you yesterday, my home run, top of the wish list hire for me is Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas. If you can do that with Rock Chalk Jayhawk, come on down to Norman, Oklahoma, where you got better talent. You've got access to better recruits. So that to me would be top of the wish list. But there's a number of intriguing candidates. And the number one thing I hope for Oklahoma is make it thorough. Don't rush this thing because you got the December early signing period sneaking up here in, a month's time or so, right? Be thorough, give this thing a week, give it 2 weeks, properly vet candidates, and then whatever Brent Venables feels is the correct choice, okay, let's run with it.
Yeah, and it seems like, they've got a group of names that they're going to explore at least, and I feel like they're moving quick on this, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be one of those that lingers into bowl season. I think we'll find out pretty quickly inside the next week. It wouldn't surprise me if that decision comes down before we even get to championship weekend, just because I feel like that's something they want to have settled. I don't necessarily think that quote unquote rushing it, but in this day and age, when you can interview guys over Zoom, they could have had, 10 interviews on Monday and kind of come to a decision, or at least been able to get all the information to where they can then come to a decision. Joe Castiglione talked about when Lincoln Riley left that he's kind of got a list of guys that he keeps in his desk who he would want to explore for head coach. And I feel like the same is true for offensive coordinator. And if by all accounts, you listen to Teddy and Gabe over on the Oklahoma Breakdown or anywhere else, and everybody's kind of talking about the idea that this was part of the plan. This was part of the expectation with Jeff Lebby almost, is that he'd come here and within 1 or 2 years, he'd be gone. He'd be out the door going somewhere else. There was a little bit of a flirtation with Alabama last early spring, but that was for the offensive coordinator job. And it seemed like as soon as a head coaching opportunity came up, he would jump at the chance. One, given the background, given the history with the Briles family, you don't know how many offers were going to come for him. You don't know how many universities were going to be willing to take that baggage on. Now there is one that did, and so he jumped at the job. And so it doesn't surprise me, or wouldn't surprise me, if they've kind of already vetted a lot of these at times in the past, at least in the background, and now are able to do a little bit more thorough interviews. As far as the in-house thing goes, man, I don't mind an in-house. It really doesn't bother me. If they feel like that is the best person for the job, then by all means, let them have it. To me, and I've had this conversation, with some friends and family and stuff over the last few days. Jeff Lebby just never fit to me personality wise with Brent Venables. Brent Venables was not just in a, Brent Venables is more humble. He's willing to take, accountability and responsibility for when things go well, or really when things go poorly. When things go well, like he puts a lot of the praise on the players. Now with Jeff Lebby, it seemed like when things didn't go well, he wanted to shift accountability to somewhere else. We talk aggressiveness and we talk mindset in game. Brent Venables has a very aggressive mindset. He's willing to go for it on fourth down. He's willing to blitz like crazy. Jeff Lebby just never seem as aggressive as Brent Venables. So you go to a guy like Seth Littrell, who just seems to have maybe a little bit more of an aggressive mindset, and maybe it's a better match personality wise. Now, one could say that it's good to have balance. I don't know, but I think they're going to have really good options to look into. I wrote a couple pieces over at Sooners Wire. One was just kind of a spin on Ryan Abers' piece over at the Oklahoman that looked into, okay, why does Seth Littrell make sense? I think continuity matters. Having continuity, you already are losing a coach. If you can bridge the gap a little bit and have a guy come in and have that same terminology, keep a lot of it the same, keep a lot of the scheme the same, a lot of the philosophy the same, I think that matters.
I think that's basically what the question you're asking when you say in-house, out of program hire is how important is continuity here? And maybe that's the most important detail, John. Maybe it is. And I know that obviously Seth Littrell and Matt Wells don't run the exact same offense as Jeff Lebby, but guess what? They've been here studying said offense. So if you want to stick with what you've been doing, theoretically, hypothetically, those two guys that are in-house, have called plays before, have sat in that seat, have been head coaches, that might be the reason to go that direction. I don't, and this is no disrespect to these gentlemen, I don't view Joe John Finley, I don't view Bill Bedenbaugh, I don't view Emmett Jones as legitimate candidates here for Oklahoma, because I think Oklahoma will go proven play callers, somebody that has experience in that role. So probably it's not going to be those in-house names. To me, I'm thinking Littrell or Wells, and those are the in-house names we're talking about here. And maybe that continuity, John, maybe that is the most important detail as we think about Jackson Arnold and the jump to the SEC. I could be sold on that.
Yeah, and I totally hear where you're coming from. I agree on, Bill Bedenbaugh, great offensive line coach, and maybe at some point he could be an offensive coordinator. It just doesn't seem like he's on that trajectory, if that makes sense. Somebody who's going to call plays, now help you design your offense, help you game plan, all that stuff. Yeah, I could see that. Same for Joe John Finley. I think maybe the opportunity is there in the future, but given what is at stake for Oklahoma in the next few years, do you want to break in a rookie play caller? I don't know if you want to go that route. Emmett Jones, I mean, the guy, he was Texas Tech's passing game coordinator, and we saw what Texas Tech did to Oklahoma at the end of the 2022 season when they just lit up the Sooners. So that one I could see making a little bit more sense, because maybe he has a little bit more experience in the game planning aspect. But again, he hasn't called plays. And that is a big part of being the offense coordinator. You got to have a feel for how to call plays in game. And yes, maybe Seth Luttrell doesn't have the traditional experience of success. And we can talk more about some of his route to Oklahoma. We'll talk through some of the other options maybe at offensive coordinator that Oklahoma should discuss. We'll talk more about all that here after the break.
Today's episode brought to us by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers, they're sticking red hot on FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. What does that mean? Well, it means pick a team, money line, your team wins. That's $150 for you. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than right now to get in on the action. We tell you all the time, but the app, it's super easy to use. Wide range of betting options, not limited, but also including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to keep rolling through this NFL season in style. Just again, some of the conference championship game numbers out there. Oregon is a 9.5-point favorite over Washington in a number that befuddles a little bit. Texas, 14.5-point favorite over Oklahoma State. Georgia has jumped up a point since yesterday. It's now 6.5. The Dogs favored over Alabama. So those some of the numbers this week in conference championship week in college football. But head on over again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL.
And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager. I'm sure that's what Brent Venables and Joe Castiglione are feeling right now as they get ready to make an offensive coordinator hire. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. If you've ever been a part of hiring, sometimes you just don't know what you're getting. A resume is one thing, an interview can help, but if you don't know the right questions to ask, you can kind of be left playing darts in the dark. You're just throwing stuff at a dartboard and hoping that you get the right person for your job. So you got to go to LinkedIn Jobs. You got to use that purple hiring frame that lets people know that you are hiring. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours by using LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So go to LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. That's LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And shout out to every dayer here on the Locked On Sooners podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're into what Locked On does, go check out one of your favorite teams elsewhere on the Locked On Network. We've got every major professional sport covered as well as college football here with Locked On Sooners. If you want to get ready for SEC, go check out our man Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC. Josh, the offensive coordinator, man, that discussion is not going to stop until we have a hire. But you talked about the guy at Kansas. I really think the dude up at Washington is an interesting idea, but considering how tied to Kalen DeBoer he is, they've been coaching on the same staff since 2007. He has a longer relationship with Kalen DeBoer, or about as long a relationship with Kalen DeBoer as I do with my wife. That's how stuck together they are. So it's fascinating. And then the dude from Liberty, I think, is an intriguing name as well. Has some ties to Clemson, although that's before Brent Venables was there. So an intriguing option there as well. So any other names, or how do you feel like the Sooners should continue to progress in this coordinator search?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Who would you qualify as potential home run hires for Oklahoma?
See, that's the thing. I just don't know, because if you looked at Jeff Lebby, would you have considered that a home run hire at the time?
Yes.
I don't. Yeah, you did. Okay. I thought it was a good hire. I think there was I still had a little bit of hesitation toward it because, he was making the step from, he was okay at Ole Miss, but you hear the way Ole Miss people talked about it, and they were kind of ready for the guy to leave too. Things didn't necessarily end there on a high note. I do think Willie Corn would be an intriguing hire, the way that he was able to help turn Coastal Carolina around. And then, they just went and had a 12-0 season in their first year in Conference USA, and might have, Liberty playing in a New Year's Six Bowl if they continue to, or can close out the season with a win in the Conference USA Championship. So it's an intriguing name, but I think it's hard for me to imagine pulling a guy like, man, I'm blanking on his name tonight, and I apologize. The guy from Washington, or even a Willie Corn away. Yeah, thank you, Grubb. Pulling Grubb away from Washington. There are people talking about, Sharon Moore out of Michigan. I just don't see him taking a lateral move, and sorry, that's not meant to be disrespectful to Oklahoma, but if you're going from offensive coordinator, offensive line coach at one spot to offensive coordinator at another spot, to me, you're not really taking a step up, and you're going from Michigan, which is a great school with a great program and great opportunity, to Oklahoma. Again, it's a lateral move in my opinion. I feel like his next move is to a head coaching position if he makes a move. A lot of people talking about Joe Brady. I just don't think Joe Brady is coming to college football again. I think he's staying in the NFL. Word is he doesn't like to recruit, and that's a big problem. Dana Holgerson just got fired because he doesn't like to recruit. Chip Kelly at UCLA, the rumor was he was going to get fired because he doesn't really like to recruit. You got to be able to recruit at the college football level. You can't rely on just your assistants to do the job. Sean Lewis, Crimson Omen mentioned Sean Lewis. I think that's a really intriguing name as well. I felt like with what he did at Colorado, to me, that's the wild card name. He got play calling duties stripped from him middle of the season, but they were averaging 32 points per game before they stripped those play calling duties. He was good, and he's a well-respected name across college football, and did all of that despite not having an offensive line. And so to me, that's really impressive. I know people are throwing out Brennan Marion a lot at UNLV. I saw Brandon Drum talk about him on Twitter today. I'm not super familiar with the guy, but again, if UNLV has a great offense, you got to take notice of the offensive coordinator that's directing that, because it's been some time since I feel like UNLV was having really, really good offensive production.
The other name that you hear bandied about, not as just a super realistic candidate, so to speak, but maybe a little bit off the beaten path, is Andy Ludwig from Utah. Is sort of an intriguing name because of the success that they've had, obviously. And then you think about, again, upgrading in talent across the board. You give me somebody like that is okay. You could talk me into that a little bit, but yeah, Willie Corn, I think, is pretty exciting potentially from Liberty. Obviously, he did really good things with Coastal Carolina before that. And again, they're just setting the world on fire offensively again this season. Already told you about Kotelnicki. He would be a good name. I don't think Stein from Oregon is realistic. I would put him in the category with Grubb and with Moore, that probably those names aren't going to happen for Oklahoma, but just about everybody else that we've talked about, John, I think is a possibility.
Yeah, and the Willie Corn thing is really intriguing to me. Again, does he want to bounce from his guy, the Jamie Chadwell? Does he want to move on from his kind of mentor, his I almost used a sacrilegious word, but no, I feel like that's a really intriguing name, but and the dude is super young. He could be one of those guys that's only here for a few years before, he moves on. I've been seeing, people talk about the North Texas situation with Seth Luttrell. Listen, not every situation is always going to be set up for success. If you followed North Texas football for much of the last 20 years, that's been a school that's been really, really difficult to win at. It doesn't matter who's gone there. It's just struggled to put together really good football teams. And Seth Luttrell actually had them quite a bit competitive during his tenure there, had them in bowl games, I think 4 out of 5 seasons, and had offenses that were pretty productive. So I wouldn't just sit there and just crap on the guy simply because it didn't work out at North Texas. It's not an easy place to win. It's not. You're in the Dallas-Fort Worth, just outside the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, and trying to recruit kids to go play in Denton. And if you've not been to Denton or spent a lot of time in Denton, unless you're doing music, it's not really a great place to be because there's just not a whole lot there. And you're 30, 45 minutes away from Dallas or Fort Worth, where there actually is stuff to do, and much further from Arlington, where you can go see some ball games. So don't just crap on the idea just because of North Texas. I grew up in the North Texas area. I've watched that program for a long time. It's just hard to have a lot of success there with the Mean Green. That said, he has had success helping offenses move and grow and things like that. So I'm not against it. And, Okie, yes, we're going to the SEC, not the AAC. Agreed. Jeff Lebby was at the AAC, then went to the SEC. The Liberty guy, he's in Conference USA. Willie Corn, he's in Conference USA.
Lincoln Riley was
Lincoln Riley.
Yes, was an Eastern Carolina guy. I'm not caught up in the conferences element of any of this, and the track record for either Luttrell or Wells from a head coaching standpoint is not of great concern to me. What has the preeminent program this side of Georgia over the last quarter century or 20 years in college football, 15 years in college football done at Alabama, and especially of late? Well, that's been the Nick Saban rehabilitation tour. So why can't Oklahoma do that? Why can't Oklahoma take a failed head coach that is a great offensive mind and have them run the show? So that part for me, I'm not concerned about that. It wouldn't scare me off that Luttrell or Wells, you would categorize them as failed head coaches. You're not hiring them to be the head coach.
Yeah, what the Wells thing is a little bit I feel a little bit less okay about Wells, because aside from the year that Jordan Love just had a great season and had Utah State, playing in, I want to say Mountain West Championship or whatever. Aside from that, things hadn't really turned out too great for Matt Wells. Again, I'm not going to say he can't ever be a great offensive mind or a great offensive coordinator, but just the track record there to me is not as good outside of having an NFL quarterback. Do you have to have an NFL quarterback to be successful, or can you be successful with lesser talent? At Texas Tech, it didn't seem like he could be successful with lesser talent. Again, it could be a totally different story at Oklahoma when you're going to get a guy like Jackson Arnold and you're going to get top flight wide receivers and good offensive line play. We'll see. But speaking of wide receivers, one of the 2024 wide receivers has decommitted from Oklahoma. We'll talk about that and a little bit more on the recruiting side of things here after the break, if I can find it.
Basketball season, it's here, heading into full swing, and with PrizePicks, the number one place for daily fantasy sports, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball while we're still cooking in football season as well from their Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues, such as, for instance, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at, let's say, a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. Do you like more than, less than, whichever side you want? You can jump in and get involved in the action with PrizePicks. They even offer their reboot policy. This is great, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use our code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 when you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use our code LockedOnCollege. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Josh, should we roll through some of the comments and questions on the offensive coordinator stuff before we move on to the recruiting things and the SEC schedule teas and all that?
Yes. Two other names, by the way, that Plank brought up this morning that I think would be surprise candidates, but because of their ties to Brent Venables aren't totally unthinkable. One of the names that he mentioned was Jeff Scott, who was previously the head coach at South Florida, Didn't go great, but again, obviously those two, they were around one another when he was the co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach from 15 to 19. And then how about this name that I'll throw at you? Chad Morris. Does that do anything for you? It doesn't excite me all that much, but those would both be two other names that have a history with Brent Venables.
No on Chad Morris, please.
I think no on both. And I think the names that we started with is probably the name we're going to finish with, one of them.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like it's going to be Seth Luttrell. Real quick on Cale Gundy, people keep bringing that up. He's not coming back. Brent Venables, he accepted his resignation. He didn't have to. He could have, buried everything if he wanted to. Not buried, but addressed it and moved on. It's not happening. He's not coming. He might be associated with the program. He might come around. He might, go do events and things like that, but he's not going to be on staff, and he's not going to be the offensive coordinator. And I get, yes, they were really good in the Alamo Bowl against Oregon a few years back. And people have tried to tell me, okay, he was next in line, or Bob was going to give him the offensive coordinator job at one point. My question to people on that is, well, why did it never happen? Yes, he's a great recruiter, but is he like a great offensive coordinator? I just don't know if we know that.
What do you think about some of the buzz that's starting to percolate out there? Bedenbaugh, DeMarco, any of these names, are you concerned?
I'm not concerned about Bill Bedenbaugh leaving. He wants to be at Oklahoma. I feel like that's as simple as I can make it. Obviously nothing in life is simple, but what was the talk whenever, Lincoln Riley left and he was kind of waiting on that Oklahoma offer from Brent Venables? He wanted to be here. He wants to be in Oklahoma. He's made this his home. His family's here. His family's here. He wants to be in the Sooner State. So I don't imagine, Jeff Lebby prying him away. DeMarco, now that could be another story. At some point you do have to ask yourself, do you want to see upward mobility? If you're not going to be the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, if Jeff Lebby's offering offensive coordinator, it wouldn't surprise me if he jumped at that idea, but he's not going to have a chance to call the plays. He'll be more of part of the offensive design and game planning and all that. So to me, it's a step up for a title. Not so much a step up to take on opportunity to call plays. So I could see it happening. And while, that would affect Oklahoma's recruiting, especially at running back, I don't necessarily think it affects it in totality. Could it affect Taylor Tatum? Sure. Could it affect Xavier Robinson? Maybe, but I think Xavier Robinson's commitment is maybe a little bit deeper than just DeMarco Murray. Could it affect, Raleek Brown, who apparently Oklahoma has reached out to, according to some of the insiders on the recruiting trail? Maybe. At the same time, you're Oklahoma. You recruited running backs really, really well before DeMarco Murray got here. You're going to continue to recruit running backs really, really well if DeMarco Murray decides to leave. And that's not a shot at DeMarco Murray. That's just the reality. It's the same at the wide receiver position, right? Like we talk about all the time. We're never going to worry about Oklahoma being able to find good wide receivers because they've been doing so for the last 25 years. They'll continue to find good running backs as well. I like DeMarco. I think he's a good coach. I think he helps, this team as a recruiting coach, and he helps get them ready and game plan. At the same time, I'm okay. I'm not okay with it. I think Oklahoma will be okay if DeMarco Murray decides to leave. And the same with Joe John. If Joe John decides to leave, I think they'll be okay. They'll figure out tight end. Davin Mitchell, he's still coming to Oklahoma. That's not changing. So I think it'll be okay. They'll figure out who to put in. I mean, if Seth Luttrell becomes the offensive coordinator, if Joe John Finley decides to leave, well, Seth Luttrell can be your offensive coordinator, tight ends coach.
Yeah, it would just be surprising to have turned down the opportunity to jump to USC if you were looking for this opportunity to jump somewhere else, which, oh, by the way, and I know all the animosity and venom and everything there, but the program's USC versus Mississippi State, the two programs we're talking about here. And, oh, by the way, the situations hypothetically are the same in the sense that Lincoln Riley's calling plays there and Jeff Lebby's calling plays at Mississippi State. So unless the offer comes down that either DeMarco or Biedenbow or Joe John legitimately get to call plays at Mississippi State, which you wouldn't think that would be on the table. Again, I think it's a dangerous game as a first-time head coach to take away what is your greatest strength, right? Your ability to call plays if you're Jeff Lebby. So I don't know, man. That sounds to me a little far-fetched that it would happen. I would believe that if and when we see that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the possibility that assistants could follow. It's the nature of the game. Relationships are what drive collegiate athletics or even any athletics. Like I had a buddy who took a high school coaching job, went from one spot to another spot here in Oklahoma and took several of his assistants with him. It's relationships. You take who you trust. And so it doesn't surprise me that Jeff Lebby is trying to get guys on staff to come with him because those are the guys he knows. He doesn't have this big coaching tree. And so he's got to reach out to the guys that he knows. And that's fair. Like it's part of the game of college football. Turnover happens all the time at the collegiate level. It's a little bit frustrating, but it's just the reality of sports, especially for assistant coaches. I mean, they're always on the move. I mean, you look back at Jay Valai's coaching history and it's nonstop. Now, there's been some buzz that maybe Jay Valai is looking to go elsewhere. And to me, that'd be a name I'd be the most concerned about losing just because I feel like he's done a fantastic job recruiting cornerback over the last couple of years that I think it would be a bummer. Now, that doesn't mean that Oklahoma couldn't get somebody in that can recruit cornerbacks, but I mean, with what we're seeing, I feel really, really good about who Oklahoma's recruiting. It's just a matter of, okay, we got to keep some continuity on staff.
Yeah, you want that. And as you pointed out, look, if you're Jeff Lebby and you take this job and it's your first head coaching gig, it would be head coaching malpractice to not call DeMarco Murray, to not call Bill Biedenbow, to not call Joe John Finley, basically everybody on the Oklahoma offensive coaching staff. It would be, I mean, hey, it'd be noble. It'd be nice to not call those guys, but to expect that he's not going to do that would be pretty naive. And, similarly, probably you're not going to turn a phone call away if one of these players on Oklahoma's roster reaches out to you either, though it feels like everything's, for the most part, feeling pretty stable so far in all of this. So we'll see. I mean, if Jeff Lebby's the only departure for Oklahoma offensively, then okay, then that's not really that dangerous for OU.
Yeah. No, it's huge, man. Having as much continuity in the roster and the coaching staff, that's incredibly key for this staff as they get ready to go to the SEC. We touched on the biggest one in our show on Monday morning. Jackson Arnold sticking around. Michael Hawkins sticking around. Zion Kearney sticking around. Davin Mitchell sticking around. You're seeing all these, David Stone sticking around. Like nothing's changing for any of these guys as we end up, as we go into the offseason, early signing periods just around the corner. I don't think we see a ton of turnover. I could see some of these maybe, offensive players that aren't getting a ton of playing time that have, a good relationship with Jeff Lebby. If he, if they want to see that they maybe have an opportunity at Mississippi State, it wouldn't surprise me to see them, pursue that as well. But I think for the most part, your guys that are part of your core that are playing a lot, they're sticking around. I mean, these are Oklahoma guys that committed to Oklahoma. And, Brent Venables talked about it when he got here, commit to the school, not to the coach. And I think we got a lot of guys that are committing to the school and not the coach. And if at least not the assistant coaches, they're committing to the head coach. So one guy who has decommitted from Oklahoma, this is Dozie Ezukanma, the 3-star wide receiver out of the Fort Worth area, All Saints Episcopal, the brother to Eric Ezukanma, the NFL wide receiver and former Texas Tech wide receiver. This one, it's surprising that it came down, but it's also not surprising. Oklahoma's had 5 wide receivers committed to their 2024 class. Zion Kearney, Zion Raggins, KJ Daniels, Ivan Carrion, and Dozie Ezukanma. And they've got a bunch of dudes coming back next year, assuming Andrew Anthony comes back, Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, possibly Jalil Farouk, Jaquez Petaway, Gavin Freeman. I mean, and then that doesn't even touch on guys like LV Bunkley Shelton and JJ Hester, who knows, man? I mean, the roster is deep at wide receiver as it is. And then you add the 2024 signees, assuming they sign. And it's kind of hard to imagine finding playing time. And unless you just are that much better than your star rating suggests.
Yeah. And I mean, really the question we're asking here is this going to be a sign of things to come for Oklahoma? And if the answer is just this, then probably you're okay, right? Because think about, we said this the other day, Oklahoma is entering next season in a totally different world at wide receiver from where we entered this past season, where there were all sorts of questions about the production and who's going to be there. Now, all of a sudden, we got those big second jump seasons from Nick Anderson, from Jaden Gibson. So you have that. Andrell Anthony, right? You hope that, I would imagine he's going to be back in the fold. Saw a bunch of good things from Andrell. He was your leading receiver before he got hurt. So wide receiver already, the cupboard is pretty stocked up for Oklahoma. And oh, by the way, even minus Dozie Ezukanma, you've got, assuming that it stays in place, the rest of it where it's at right now. John, it's a heck of a 24 recruiting class.
Yeah, and then 2025 looks like it's going to be a banger just after that. I mean, they've already got 3 wide receivers, I think 2 or 3 wide receivers. I didn't look at it, but they've got several wide receivers already committed to the 2025 class that are 4-star or better and still going after some big time prospects. And that Terry Bussey is not off the table because it's Oklahoma. You don't rule anything out. You never count count yourself out of any recruitment. Just like we saw with Peyton Bowen last year, it would not surprise me to see them flip somebody big time here down the stretch. I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot of decommitments from Oklahoma. I made the bold prediction that Dozie was probably going to be the only one. And I feel pretty confident in that because this recruiting class seems really connected and really tight for the most part. And they want to play together. They want to come into this thing together and they want to go to the SEC together. And they all seem really locked into Oklahoma. Again, David Stone's locked in. He's your highest rated player. Michael Hawkins, your quarterback. He's locked in. Those are the 2 most influential players in this recruiting cycle. And they're locked in. So I don't imagine a whole lot much else changes on that. Should we get into some SEC schedule talk there, Josh?
We should, just on the subject that you mentioned, Jaden Nickens, Elijah Thomas, and Grayson Harris all already committed in the 2025 class. But yes, the SEC, as it were.
Yeah, SEC schedule tease a little bit. We got Tennessee is who Oklahoma will open their SEC schedule with 3rd or 4th week of September, or the 4th week of the regular season. I think it's September 21 was the date on that. And then the Oklahoma Sooners get Alabama on November 23rd, the week before rivalry week, which, man, that's going to be fun, dude, because if Oklahoma's good, that one's going to have big time SEC title game implications, college football playoff implications as we head down the stretch. I mean, that's a college game day type atmosphere in Norman that second to last weekend of the regular season, man. The schedule is going to be crazy. It's going to be absolutely crazy because you're going to be going from, Tennessee to Ole Miss to Texas to, Alabama at the end of it. You're going to have Missouri. I presume
Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn. Presumably you got Missouri the last week of the season, I would imagine. And then you're probably going to be playing LSU at night at somewhere in there, which is going to be crazy as well.
Yeah, no, it's what we've been waiting on multiple years now, ever since the first news came down that Oklahoma was going to be pulling the trigger and making this jump. You've been waiting for these types of games on the schedule, home really and away, but definitely in Norman. And to know that you're going to open with the return of Heupel and Tennessee obviously has some big time juice to it. And they've, with their success the last couple of years, it makes that a really exciting SEC opener for Oklahoma. And then I love the fact that, yes, Alabama is going to be, as the season starts to crescendo, what a former head coach liked to coin as championship November around here. But hey, maybe we don't use that term anymore. But bottom line is, when the schedule's starting to heat up, to welcome Alabama in late, I mean, whether it's Alabama with a lot to play for, we hope Oklahoma's still a lot to play for. It just doesn't get much better than that you're going to get to play Alabama late in the season. I love that that's the late game rather than the early in the season game, because, man, the fan base that day, it's going to be Notre Dame. It's going to be Ohio State. It's going to be insert, Texas Tech jump around, but bigger than that, just in terms of the blue blood status. Now, the jump around game obviously is tough to beat because of the implications and stakes that were on the line and how well Oklahoma played that day. But just the sheer blue blood opponents. I mean, the feeling that you had walking to Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium for that Notre Dame, for that Ohio State game, those would be the two recent ones. You say recent, and now Notre Dame was quite some time ago, but those would be the most recent games that are going to have anything similar to what that Alabama game day is going to feel like.
It's going to be awesome. It really will be awesome, and has a chance to be another, a primetime game, or at least an afternoon kick, to really take advantage of the atmosphere and really build that up. I really think that the SEC would be wise to make that at least a 2:30, 3 o'clock kick, if not a primetime game. But that late in the season, having that type of a game, that type of an environment with potential big time implications on the line, that's why Oklahoma is going to the SEC, for that right there, as opposed to playing BYU the second to last week of the season. Now, no disrespect to BYU, a great atmosphere, a great environment, but you're going because you get these big environments back, and hopefully you're a competitive team and you've got a lot to play for as November goes along. All right, Josh, take us through the comment section, man. Hit us up with something good.
Larry chimes in, sure need Danny Stutzman and Billy to come back for the first year in the SEC, which, by the way, fantastic play-by-play call from one Toby Rowland. That was amazing from T-Row, which, hey, flu game and all, but we expect that from Toby Rowland. It would be gigantic for Oklahoma if you could get one of the two back. If you get both back, then obviously the type of stability that would provide. We talk about continuity with what's going to happen with this OC hire, but continuity in terms of the players on the field is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, if you get Danny Stutzman to come back for one more year, you get Billy Bowman to come back for one more year, dude, I really feel like that sets you up to improve even further than what you did from 22 to 23. It gives you a chance to continue to get better. And I think one of them comes back at least. I mean, both guys I think are probably could be top 100 picks in this next year's NFL draft. But if they come back and they produce at the same level against SEC competition, I mean, they could thrust themselves into, top 50 picks. Billy Bowman could become a top 40 pick. Danny Stutzman the same. Like, now, safety, linebacker, they're not necessarily high priority positions in the NFL draft, but there's a chance that they could even further solidify themselves in that top 50, top 100 range.
What do you make of this? Which, by the way, Clandestine Syndicate sends it in, and that is a fabulous name. It's from like Assassin's Creed or something. A Clandestine Syndicate. Heard Lebby was a good NIL guy. What does that even mean? I'm here to tell you, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that, hey, here's what you can get at Oklahoma, and our pitch is pretty good, and all of a sudden you close the deal. So I don't know if that means you're a good fundraiser. It could mean a lot of different things, but suffice it to say, whether Lebby's a good NIL guy or not, Oklahoma's going to be just fine on the name, image, likeness front. I think that they've proven to be, I said this last offseason, we talked about it on a number of different occasions, John. Oklahoma doesn't do what it did out of the portal without being a successful name, image, likeness program. So if that is any sort of concern for you, I'm here to tell you it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about whether or not Jeff Lebby was a good NIL
salesman,
recruiter, salesman, fundraiser. I'm not worried about that. You got Joe Castiglione, you got Joseph Harraz, you've got Oklahoma's NIL arm. It's going to be fine. They get people donating millions of dollars at a time for softball stadiums and, for workout facilities. Like, this is Oklahoma, man. There's only one Oklahoma.
Indeed, indeed. What else do we have out there from the folks? Lone Wolf, just make Emmett Jones happy.
Please. Yes, please. But please give him something that is going to keep him around in Norman for some time, because he might be your best recruiter. And I think he's got those guys, especially Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson, playing at a level that, and I said it about Jaden Gibson, like, the dude's got an attitude that we haven't seen in Norman since CeeDee Lamb. He's got an edge about him. And if he can continue to develop his game and build up his, strength and his size, I mean, he could have that same kind of an impact as CeeDee Lamb did. Nick Anderson, I mean, the dude is just fluid. He's smooth. He's playing great ball. I mean, he had 9 touchdowns. He had a breakout season this year. Now, get a little bit more consistent, cut down on some of the drops, and he could elevate to a star in the next couple of years as well.
Here's another argument for Luttrell or Wells from Crimson Omen. Venables could use a former head coach for game management purposes, though I would say I do think Oklahoma largely improved in that regard. And Venables obviously, to some degree probably leaned on those guys during the offseason, if not, in game, probably. I don't know. You couldn't really, I don't think you're supposed to be having much contact with analysts, right, in game. But long story short, I hear what you're saying. And there was, I think, growth made there by Brent Venables in Oklahoma. But it doesn't hurt to have somebody else that sat in that type of seat.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got experience as a play caller. He knows game management. I think that helps a lot for sure. You can't have too many voices in your ear saying, hey, let's take a time out here. Hey, let's go for it here. Hey, this is what the analytics are saying here, and being able to make adjustments in game. I think having that experience matters as well. Having been a head coach, having been a coordinator for a long, long time, and, going through the adjustment part of it, going through the feel of the game and being able to make critical decisions at critical times, that matters, man. And we know that Jeff Lebby struggled with that. And that's the Kansas game, the Oklahoma State game are evidence that, he struggled in critical situations to make the right decision at times.
Are you ready for Corn Dog to return to the state of Oklahoma? Willie Corn from Liberty. Blake wants Corn from Liberty to get a strong look.
Yeah. I mean, I think he should get an interview. If they're interested, if there's mutual interest there, then they should interview him. To me, though, he looks like the guy that's about to come start the next church plant in Norman, just based on the way he looks. But he just looks like a millennial dude that's going to give you a cup of coffee and welcome you to his new church. But no, Willie Corn, the success is there. I mean, he made Grayson McCall a household name at Coastal Carolina. He's helped Liberty go to a 12-0 record. Like, this is a really good offensive coordinator. If he doesn't get snatched up by Oklahoma, eventually he will be on somebody in the Power Five's radar.
Sooner fan says just joined, and welcome aboard. We're happy to have you in here. Let me ask you this before we get out of here and call it a night. And thanks to everybody for jumping in and hanging out with us. It's an interesting time in Oklahoma football, right? As you kind of go through this little transition here with who are they going to hire. How important do you feel differently getting to sleep on it one more night and waking up today? And now you've got all these candidates out there in the atmosphere. Do you feel stronger or less strongly that Oklahoma needs to get this hire done quickly? Do they have time for this hire? Where are you at with all of that now?
I feel like they've got time because you have locked in commitments from your big time players on the offensive side of the ball in the 2024 recruiting cycle. Jackson Arnold sticking around. If you had concern that Jackson Arnold might go, that Michael Hawkins wasn't going to stay, that Zion Kearney might bail, that Davin Mitchell was out the door, then I'd say let's make this thing happen quick so we can make sure we lock those guys in. At the same time, this is why it's so important to have Emmett Jones, because he's been the primary recruiter for a lot of these things, for Davin Mitchell, for Zion Kearney, for KJ Daniels, for Zion Reagans. Like, locking those guys down means you have a little bit of time to make the right call here. At the same time, sometimes making the right call can happen pretty quick too. So however long it takes to make it happen, I mean, it's going to happen in time. And I feel like they've got a pretty good idea of what they want, and they've got a good idea, maybe even of who they want at this point.
Since Sooner fan just jumped in, is Guy from UNLV going to be our OC?
Yeah, I don't think Marion's going to get there. Not because he's not good, but I just feel like if it's not going to be an inside hire, I feel like they're going to reach a little bit higher up the offensive coordinator experience chain, or, look for somebody who's been more productive or has more experience of productivity, and a bigger name,
Let's see here. Rob wants to know what's up with this. Lebby talking with Murray. Is this true or nah?
I mean, I can't tell you whether it's true or not. It sounds true. It sounds like something that's, and guys that are out there reporting it, I have no reason to believe it's not accurate. And it's like we talked about earlier in the show, that if you're not reaching out to the guys that about, hey, come coach with me, then you're not really doing your job as a head coach to build your staff. DeMarco Murray is a successful running backs coach. Why wouldn't you reach out to him? Now, whether DeMarco leaves or not, that's going to be the big question.
No, that's right. Yeah. And what I said earlier, Rob, was, to me, it basically boils down to, is DeMarco, is Bill Bedenbaugh, Joe John Finley, if those three names were, say, three coaches that Lebby was trying to pluck, are any of those three legitimately going to get greater oversight over offensive play calling? Are they outright going to get to call plays at Mississippi State? I wouldn't think so, but maybe that's a direction Lebby wants to go, right? I mean, I can't imagine he would. I just think it's dangerous as a head coach to immediately give up what got you the gig as the head coach. So to me, why would you leave Oklahoma where it's stable? You've got things headed in a positive direction. Look at this recruiting momentum Oklahoma's had for the last couple of years, especially, John, and you're going to leave that to not call plays at OU. Like, I think about somebody like Joe John Finley. Here he weathers the storm of this season, right? And now all of a sudden you got Devon Mitchell coming in. Tight end play is about to get a lot better at Oklahoma. And then all of a sudden you would have a chance to leapfrog, go jump somewhere else, and really position yourself in a good way to be an offensive coordinator, a play caller, and then eventually to get that head coaching gig down the line. I think that's a safer route to get to a head coaching gig if you're really any of those guys and you want to.
Yeah, to me, if you're looking for upward mobility, I mean, the next step would be to be an offensive coordinator that's getting an opportunity to call plays, especially for Joe John Finley. I mean, he was kind of a de facto offensive coordinator this year, where he was relaying the signals in on the sideline and was a big part of the game planning. So if you're going to Mississippi State, I mean, you need to go so that you can call plays and continue that upward track. But I mean, for a guy like DeMarco Murray, I mean, getting the offensive coordinator title, that'd be a step up for him. And then at some point, though, he's going to have to look for a job that allows him to call the plays if that's what he wants down the road. So you got to know what these guys want. And are they of that mind where they want to, chase the title and the career and that upward mobility? And if so, more power to them. You're probably going to have to make moves in order to do that. You got to jump around to get that next step up. Or do you want to be a guy like Bill Bedenbaugh that just seems very content in his role at Oklahoma, being the offensive line coach, probably, quote unquote, run game coordinator at some point, assistant head coach or associate head coach, something like that. But I mean, you kind of have to learn to be content. And we talked about this on our show yesterday. Brent Venables is a great example of being content where you're at and being patient and letting the right opportunity come to you, because I mean, he waited it out. He waited on the head coaching job that was going to be just the right fit for him at the right time. And this was it. He could have had any number of head coaching jobs over the last, 25 years because of the success he's had as a defensive coordinator, but he bided his time and he waited it out. And now here we are. And so he's got a great voice in this, but a lot of these guys are young. Jay Valai's young, DeMarco Murray's young, Joe John, he's young. They're going to have this career minded, path that they want to pursue at some point. You don't want to just be a position coach forever. Some do, some don't. Some don't want to be offensive coordinators forever. They want to get that opportunity to be a head coach at some point. So it wouldn't surprise me to see some of them leave, because at some point you got to, in order to take that next step up.
And we don't know what ticks for everybody, right? I mean, Bill Bedenbaugh might be the happiest guy in the world being Oklahoma's offensive line coach. Seemed to be that way a couple of years ago when the USC situation presented itself. And really, he was just, as we discussed earlier, waiting on the opportunity to stay here at Oklahoma. So again, you kind of think that everybody wants to be a head coach, but we don't know that to be true.
I think back to guys like Dick LeBeau, the Pittsburgh, Steelers defensive coordinator. I mean, that dude was there forever as the DC. Now, he had his opportunities as a head coach. It didn't work out well. Not every great coordinator makes a great coach, makes a great head coach. Sometimes you get a Dick LeBeau or a Wade Phillips that, okay, maybe they had a little bit of success, but really they were at their best when they were just coordinators. Or, you look at assistants or position coaches. Sometimes you're at your best in that role, and that's okay. Like, not everybody has to be a great head coach. Not everybody has to be a great coordinator. Sometimes you're just great at what you do as a position coach, and some people just thrive in that role, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a sign of failure that you didn't climb the ladder and become Nick Saban. There's only a few guys that are able to do that, and that's okay. So it's going to be fascinating over the next few days to see how this, plays out. Back to just kind of the outside hire thing. I think Sean Lewis is going to be the outside hire name that gets the most buzz, because what he was able to do with Kent State, and to me, what he was able to do with Colorado, given the fact that they really did not have much of an offensive line, and Shadur Sanders was not given much time to do much offensively, they were pretty impressive. Even if they weren't able to win as many games as it looked like they might at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I still think that Willie Korn has a pretty good chance in all of this. I think that there's a couple of outside hire names that are going to have something serious to say about this. I'm excited to watch how it plays out over the next couple of weeks, because obviously for Oklahoma, I mean, look, no-brainer statement, but this is a big-time hire. Given you're jumping to the SEC, Oklahoma needs to retain all of this offensive talent that it's gotten. They need to take it up a notch, right? They need to continue to improve. So I wouldn't mind whichever direction you tell me is going to make Oklahoma a little bit more physical, can help along the interior, the outside of the offensive line, just up front in general for OU. So going to be interesting. Going to be a fascinating week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and the portal season is just getting started. I mean, Marcus Hicks, DJ Graham have already announced their intentions to enter the transfer portal. And so we'll cover the portal. We'll cover portal needs. What does Oklahoma need to go do in the portal to solidify their roster for 2024? We'll do that and continue to cover the offensive coordinator search and whatever assistant coaching changes occur as well as the weeks go on. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sooners wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners and on Facebook, Locked On Sooners podcast as well. And if you're sticking around, hey, go check out the Locked On Sports Dallas or Locked On Sports Today shows that are streaming live 24/7 here on YouTube as well. Go check them out. Again, we can't wait to discuss more offseason topics with you and find out where Oklahoma is going to go play in the bowl game. Championship weekend is coming up. We'll have our picks this week as well. Until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. Thanks for being here tonight on the live show. Boomer Sooner.